if we have had over 45 years of so many of our intellectual capacity migrating, or intellectual capital, part of our development process must involve tapping back into that. So that while we have put a focus on remittances, and it's important, the money, if we can get that brain power engaged in our development, it will leapfrog our transformation process. And that's really my ultimate goal.
Ambassador Marks, welcome home.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be back in Jamaica, this time in a new hat as minister? Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And it is really wonderful to be home. I've wanted to come home for the last 5 years because I went in 2016 for 4 years, so 2020 it was time for COVID. And it was such a busy time, just making sure everything goes well for our people. That the time just ran out, and we had to manage the period with COVID, so I stayed. But I've been pining. I think it's time. So I'm happy to be home to answer your question. Yes, yes.
You have now transitioned as well from a distinguished diplomat to a ministerial portfolio. What can you share about your new role and its focus?
So this is an area that I'm particularly interested in. The ministry is called the Ministry of Efficiency, Innovation, and Digital Transformation.
Wow.
And it's not by coincidence. The PM, the Prime Minister, had launched the Aspire initiative, just looking at how we can move from the focus on stabilizing the economy to go for growth. And a vital part of going for growth is to do public sector reform and lay a foundation that our entrepreneurs can thrive. Mm-hmm. And to facilitate all of that, we need to utilize technology. So efficiency is how we can modernize our public service, bring more efficiencies into the bureaucracy. Innovation, how we can use the talents of our people, because we're some of the most creative people in the world, I believe. And digital transformation is we now have technology that can do so much more to drive an efficient society. And when you combine all three, I think that's where the magic is going to start to happen.
It is a big portfolio, though, Minister. What are your immediate priorities, you would say, or your goals?
So my immediate priorities, I have some immediate priorities, but before I get to that, I'm 3 weeks to the job. So the first week was really just, getting organized, getting an office space and getting to know my surroundings, meeting with colleagues in the cabinet, getting to understand the priorities of the government in a more granular fashion. Because it is easy in government, I see, where you can get caught up in your area. But where we're going to see the difference is when we start becoming more of a joint government, where we can establish very clear KPIs that we all work towards, so we can see maximum impact. So the first thing is just getting the lay of the land. And second, I started my internal meetings, because it's important in this role to ensure there's buy-in from the internal stakeholders, so that I can understand what are their pain points that they are also wanting to change. For example, something that came up frequently, the procurement system. It is a hassle for the internal staff. And sometimes it's easy for persons to say, the civil servants just don't want to support or facilitate. But if the rules and the regulations are such that tie their hands, they are going to stick to it. So I needed them to feel comfortable telling me what they'd like to see, so we can build a more fit-for-purpose bureaucracy. And the third thing that I'm now doing is we are doing the research on the critical external stakeholders, like the Bankers Association, because that's a big pain point for a lot of my diaspora friends trying to come back and open accounts. The process of of just the Manufacturers Association, the private sector organizations generally, because you need for them to feel that they will be facilitated and we are hearing from them so that they will feel comfortable doing even more investment. I want to hear from the young entrepreneurs, the smaller to medium-sized businesses, because as you know, that is what drives growth all over the world. But coming from being a small business person in this country to become more of a medium-sized business person, it was a constant fight all the way. I never felt encouraged by the system. It was a battle, and I'd like to change that. And that's why innovation, being part of the portfolio, is so important, because it's important that we give our people an idea that their creativity, the ideas that they come up with, is valued and they are celebrated. There's nothing different about San Francisco. They don't have more important or the brightest minds, but they have created a culture that we now refer to as Silicon Valley, where people can try their ideas and they are supported. We need that here in Jamaica. We need to have our people feel supported to try to do things and do things differently.
Fantastic, fantastic, Minister. I'm going to be switching between calling you ambassador and minister. Having known that you've been an ambassador for so long.
And that's the one I'll keep
yes,
anyway.
Yes,
So
But, how do you see your experience, though, as the ambassador to the United States informing your approach now as minister? Because I know you just spoke about the diaspora being very important and getting with the Bankers Association people, etc., etc. But how do you see your experience as ambassador informing your approach as minister?
So I've learned to take a very pragmatic approach to foreign affairs. I had to take a pragmatic approach because, and this is one of my favorite quotes that I saw somewhere. There are no permanent friends, there are no permanent enemies, there are permanent interests. And so my approach is always to say, what is it that we are trying to achieve? And focus on how we get there. And my experience in the US in particular, it was clearly a blessing to serve for nearly 10 years in the biggest economy in the world, the most diverse, the most industrialized country in the world, and one where we had a large diaspora. So there was a comfort level and a support, but an amazing network, great exposure. So when I come back, and sometimes I get frustrated. I get frustrated when I'm driving along the streets and they are not being maintained. And I realize that if I was here, I wouldn't see it this way. But the exposure has given me a different way to look at things, and I want to use that to change how we do things here in Jamaica. I was fortunate to have worked with 4 different administrations or 3 different presidents for a short while.
Right.
And started with President Obama and ending with President Trump. And it gave me an understanding of America, because administrations come and go, but there are some underlying qualities that make that country, do things differently. And I want that to be where we are in Jamaica, where certainly we must support the political party that is doing a good job, but we must see Jamaica beyond politics. We must set some big goals that we are trying to achieve, and we all work towards them. And some of our biggest success stories, for example, is this recent one, the achieving debt to GDP of now, I think it's now 70% of debt to GDP, coming from almost 150%.
Right.
We saw the bipartisan effort that led to that.
We have done well.
We have done well, and we need to take that approach as a people in so many other ways.
Let's reflect on your time in Washington,
Yes.
Ambassador.
Yeah.
You were Jamaica's first female ambassador
Yeah.
to the United States, and you also served 2 terms. What would you say would define your legacy in Washington, D.C.?
I think, before I went before I went into that office, when I was asked to go, I actually did a business plan. And I look at who are the critical stakeholders. And the critical stakeholders is the United States government, the citizens of the United States, especially business people, and the regular people who make up the majority of our visitors to Jamaica, 70% of our visitors from the United States, and the diaspora. And I look at how can I reach to all of those critical stakeholders in building a relationship that will have mutual benefit, where they will feel good about it and will benefit Jamaica. So I really took a very targeted approach in my interactions because I was driven by a plan. And that's why I'm so big into setting goals.
Yes.
And implementing goals rather than, because we have a tendency to want to do things quickly and in an ad hoc way, and we don't see the full impact of it that way. I'm very glad and gratified that when I was leaving, I had such a wide cross-section of persons who came out and, and could recount where, my leadership had made a difference in how they view the relationship with Jamaica. And especially, again, I mentioned the diaspora, they're very supportive, and I think we have built an even better relationship during that time.
So would you say then that was the most fulfilling part of your tenure as ambassador?
The most fulfilling part of my tenure is threefold, really. It is achieving the goals that I set out to achieve. And the goals were involved those three areas. I think we have established a very strong relationship with the United States. And even though we might have differences throughout the different administrations, they were able to work with us on certain goals, and we made progress. And what it is, you see, success is not only by what you can see, but also what you prevent from happening because of the strength of the relationship. And during my time, I saw where, certain sanctions, certain penalties were levied against various countries. And Jamaica could fall in those categories. But by the strength of the relationship and showing mutual benefit to maintain a certain approach, I think we benefited tremendously. And I was happy to leave on a note where the secretary came and reaffirmed the strength of our relationship, although it was a new administration. So it shows the continuity of the relationship with Jamaica.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
And so that was very important. The Jamaicans, the amount of Jamaicans who are abroad, members of our diaspora, investing in Jamaica, coming back to invest, taking out passports, wanting their children to be connected to Jamaica, visiting the embassy, connecting with us to say we want to be involved in the direction that Jamaica is going. We want to reconnect with Jamaica. That was very gratifying for me. We see, the one negative part of it is that it gives me more pressure when I come back to invest in Jamaica and get real estate. I see real estate prices have just gone crazy in this country. Because there's such a demand and we're an island. So but I also see a lot of developments going on. So hopefully we'll meet the demand where prices will become more affordable.
We hope so. But I'm sure you must have had unexpected challenges, etc. Talk about those.
Oh, we always have unexpected challenges. But when you're in a framework, when you're operating a framework where it kind of sounds a bit corny, but when you know what you're trying to achieve, when the challenges come up, you work with them and keep on track. Okay. So let me see, what would have been a major challenge?
Travel advisors?
I'll come to that. The first challenge was the biggest challenge. When I went, they were looking to put sanctions on Jamaica because of that whole Dudos affair.
Oh.
That was my first challenge.
Wow.
And so what they would say, you cut your teeth on that one, that was a big challenge. So after that, everything became easier. because the first job was to prevent Jamaica, sanctions on Jamaica, because we don't know, but it would have affected our air travel, our remittances, our visas. A lot of things happen when you're in the US bad books, and they're our biggest neighbor, and we haven't established enough relationship around the world. So that was the first one. The second one, and it's almost at the time when I was leaving last year, was the travel advisory, and that one came out of the blue because it was not dealt with in the usual bilateral negotiations. What would have happened is that more technical persons would have said, oh, these are Jamaica's data. This is not good, this is what it means. And so we were still at level 3. We were not moved to a different level. But the language was stronger. And then there seemed to be a coordinated effort to just get it out there. And it was almost like an attack on our tourism industry.
There was.
But we fought back, and we're not where we want to be yet. But this administration, they have committed to doing a review. And we'll keep pushing at it. The language got better later in the year in the travel advisory. And we'll keep pushing for a better level because tourism is important to us. And I don't think the travel advisory that came out truly reflected Jamaica. We have problems, but not worse than anywhere else, and certainly better than many others in that category. So,
Ambassador, you've really played a critical role deepening Jamaica's diaspora engagement. What impact, though, do you think your initiatives have had on diaspora relations? I know you touched on that.
Yes. But it's much better. It's much better in terms of persons feeling engaged, as far as I can see. And I feel that because of the amount of inquiries we get to do investments in Jamaica, the amount of persons will call me and say they're coming home, or call the embassy or the consulates to ask for information of where they can work with, do more in health, in education, in investments, to buy houses or help schools. Just the level of engagement, I think, is important. And I think it's important because for the last 45 years now, we have been having massive migration, and we have been having we have been having a brain drain. Some of our brightest people have looked for opportunities overseas. But we are very blessed in that I have not met a Jamaican who is not very connected to Jamaica, even when they're abroad 40, 50 years. In fact, many of them have had to go on campaigns saying, you can get your US passport and still keep your Jamaican passport. So it means that there's that desire to be connected to their homeland. And what we did was engage that desire. And a big part of that is, if we have had over 45 years of so many of our intellectual capacity migrating, or intellectual capital, part of our development process must involve tapping back into that. So that while we have put a focus on remittances, and it's important, the money, if we can get that brain power engaged in our development, it will leapfrog our transformation process. And that's really my ultimate goal. And that's what we were working on. And that is what I know we'll continue working on at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Fantastic. What advice would you give to the new ambassador to the United States?
So we have met, and I did a handover, so to speak, in terms of what I believe are some important points to note. And my number one advice would be to have a very clear position on what you're going to try and achieve on the bilateral front. Because the bilateral relationship now has taken on a much more important role, meaning that it's more transactional than before. The government in the US, they are trying to achieve certain goals. They have an America First agenda. But the America First agenda does not mean America alone. It is therefore incumbent on us to understand where are the areas where we can have win-win with their agenda and our agenda, and pursue those areas. And we started that process. So there are about 5-6 areas that we see, that Jamaica can play a very important role. Jamaica and the Caribbean. We're a natural nearshore destination. We have, people-to-people relationships. So if you can come up with 4, 5, 6 areas of cooperation that can show clear mutual benefit to the America First agenda, it's a good starting point. And that's part of what we discuss as a first step. And I also encourage continued deep engagement with our diaspora.